Okay guys, so today we are going to go over homeostasis and feedback loop. So hopefully you kind of recognize these terms from your vocab. First one we're going to make sure that you understand is homeostasis. Okay, so homeo, or kind of like homo, same, stasis, the state of being. So this is the tendency of the body to maintain a stable, balanced internal environment. Okay. So, aka maintaining equilibrium. Okay. So, for example, your temperature. Okay, you have a very set range as to what that homeostasis, that equilibrium is. And basically, if you can't maintain homeostasis, if you can't maintain that equilibrium, you die. Okay, so no homeostasis can lead to death. Okay. Alright. So we're going to go over a couple terms before we get into the process or the steps for homeostasis. So a couple terms that you need to be aware of. Okay. So the first one is going to be receptors. Okay. So you have receptors all over your body for them to basically just kind of monitor and detect changes. So they're going to detect certain environmental parameters. So for example, you have receptors that detect your temperature, making sure that you stay within that required range. So the parameters, okay, so example is going to be temperature. Okay, and they're going to relay that information to the brain or to your nervous system. To nervous system. Okay, the next term is going to be your set points. Okay, so that's going to be the norm or the normal range for the different conditions in your body. For the conditions of your body. Okay, so for example, temperature would be around 98.6. Okay, so that's the set point, somewhere within that range. Okay, and then, sorry, that was 2. All right, and then the last term is going to be the effectors. Okay, so this is going to be any muscle or gland that's going to respond to that deviation in order to help get you back to the set point. So the effect, this is going to be a muscle, gland, etc. So there's lots of different things that respond to the deviation from your set point. Okay, their whole purpose or their response is to try to get you back to that homeostasis point. Alright, so now we're going to go over the homeostasis cycle. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Alright, so you start off with having some sort of variable. Okay, and this variable sits on a balance. Alright, so this is your variable. So it could be, for example, it could be temperature. Okay, so then if something happens that creates an imbalance, okay, so we have our condition or our internal environment at a certain equilibrium. Okay, so if that changes and it becomes imbalanced, so you are going away from homeostasis, okay, so you are imbalanced. Okay, this is going to set certain things in motion. Okay, so that first thing that happens, this imbalance, is going to be your stimulus. Okay, so your stimulus is something that produces a change from the norm. Okay, so that's step one. So after you have this stimulus, okay, this needs to be detected by your body. So this is going to be sensed. Okay, so that's the second part. Okay, so then that change is detected. Okay, so if we go back to the original example of temperature, okay, so some sort of stimulus, let's say you go outside and it's really hot, so the heat would be your stimulus, and then the change is detected, so somewhere in your nervous system, that increase in temperature is going to be detected. Okay. So then that change, once it's been detected, it needs to be sent to your nervous system. Okay. So then that takes us to the next point, which is your input. Okay, so that means that the info is sent to, I'm going to abbreviate nervous system, okay, through afferent pathway. Okay, now this is very important. Okay, so info is sent to the nervous system through the afferent. Okay, so that's the first part. Okay, and so then that information is going to get here. So this is going to go to your control center, somewhere in your nervous system. Okay, and then your nervous system, your control center, is going to come up with a response. Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we get back to that homeostasis? Okay, so then it's going to come up with a solution, and that brings us to the next part, which is going to be your output. Okay, so you had information sent about the change in equilibrium, sent by the afferent pathway. It gets processed in your control center, and so now the response needs to be sent out. So this is your output. So nervous system, okay, is going to send info, it's going to send that response through the efferent. So input is through the afferent, and then output is through the efferent pathway. So that information is going to be sent, okay, and then that's going to be sent to your effector. Okay, so that goes back to our terminology. So it's going to be sent somewhere else to your body that has that capability of getting you back to that set point. Effector. Okay, and so then that effector is going to result in a response. So that response, okay, is going to be some action of your body to get back to homeostasis. So then you should hopefully get back to homeostasis. If you don't get to homeostasis, you're just going to keep going until you either get to homeostasis or you die. Okay, so just to recap, you have the set point, okay, where you try to maintain equilibrium. If something causes an imbalance, like a temperature increase, okay, that's going to be detected, okay, and that detected information is going to be sent by the afferent pathway to your control center, so somewhere in your nervous system, where it's going to send information back out to the body through the efferent pathway to some part of your body. So whatever effector, could be like your sweat glands, for example, if your temperature got really high, and it's going to cause them to start sweating to try to get your temperature back to normal, back to that homeostasis. All right, the only thing that I want to add is where you have your receptor. Okay, so this would be where your receptor sits. So that thing that detects the change. Alright, last two things. There are two forms of feedback loops. Okay, so kind of the pathways that get information sent to your nervous system to kind of keep you in that steady or that set point. Okay, so the first one is going to be a negative feedback loop. Okay, and how does this maintain homeostasis? Okay, so first of all, this is going to be the most common kind of pathway for information and all that good stuff. Okay, so this is a mechanism in which the effect, okay, or the reaction acts as the off switch. Okay, this is to make sure that you don't go too far in the other direction. So the body does not go too far in other direction. Okay, so back to our sweating example. Okay, so if your temperature gets too high, so this is an example. So if your temp is high, okay, the response is going to be sweating, okay, which is going to lead to a drop in temperature. Hopefully you cool down, okay, and then that in return is going to turn off sweating. Because if you were to keep sweating and sweating, even though you had already cooled down, your temperature is going to drop too far. Okay, and now you're going to be too cold. Alright, and then the last type of loop is not as common. This is known as a positive feedback loop. Okay, this is going to, not as common. And what does it do? This is going to amplify or increase the occurrence of events. Okay, so the example for this one of the most popular examples, is going to be childbirth. Alright, and so the reason that childbirth is considered a positive feedback is because once a woman goes into labor, the contractions are going to keep increasing over time. Okay, so there's a couple other examples of positive feedback, maybe like blood clotting is another popular one, like whenever you get a cut. But this is probably the most common form of positive feedback, or most common example that you'll see out there. Okay. Alright, so just let me know if you have any questions.